Boy steps in to defend elderly strangers. 24 hours later, his life changes forever. The days after the community event passed quickly, but the feeling it left behind stayed in Michael's heart. Something had changed inside him. He no longer saw himself as just a quiet boy from a small neighborhood. He felt stronger, not because people had clapped for him or given him awards, but because now he knew, really knew, that one small action could mean so much. Michael didn't let that feeling fade. He kept visiting Mr. and Mrs. Thompson every week. Sometimes he helped them with chores. Sometimes they just sat on the porch together talking. Those little visits mattered to all of them. The Thompsons said he was like the grandson they never had. And Michael, he felt like he was part of something bigger, something warmer. At school, people started treating him differently. Kids who never talked to him before now smiled in the hallway. A few even came up and told him they were proud of what he did. One boy, quiet and usually by himself, came over at lunch one day and said, "I saw a kid getting picked on last week, and I stood up for him because I thought of you." Michael didn't know what to say. He just smiled and nodded. That one moment meant everything. The youth program he joined with Mr. Johnson and Mr. Roberts became a big part of his life. Twice a week, Michael would meet with younger kids, sit in a circle, and talk. He told his story, but more importantly, he listened to theirs. Some kids were scared to speak at first. Some cried. But slowly, week by week, they opened up. Michael wasn't trying to be a leader. He just wanted kids to know they weren't alone. And somehow, that was enough. One day, during a meeting, Michael had an idea. "What if we start our own group?" he asked. Just kids, supporting each other, sharing stories, helping each other do the right thing. Mr. Johnson smiled and nodded right away. That's how Young Champions was born. The group started with just a few kids, but soon, it grew. They planned events together, cleaned up the park, helped with food drives, and even wrote cards to the elderly in the community. Michael saw the impact building, slow and steady, like ripples in water. At home, Lena was watching it all happen with quiet pride. She worked long hours, but she always made time to listen when Michael talked about the group, the kids, the new ideas he had. One evening, as he spread papers across the table to plan a peer meeting, Lena sat across from him and said softly, "You know, your father would be so proud of you." Michael looked up, surprised. His mother rarely talked about his dad. He had passed away when Michael was just a baby. "Really?" he asked. She smiled, a little sadly but with warmth in her eyes. "He believed in doing what's right no matter what, just like you. You've got that same spirit in you." Michael didn't say anything at first, but he felt something settle deep in his heart. That meant more to him than any award or speech. As the months passed, Michael's life felt full, but not busy in a bad way, full of purpose, full of small moments that made everything worth it. One weekend, as he helped Mr. Thompson rake leaves, the old man looked at him and said, "You know, son, what you did that day at the store? It didn't just help us. It changed everything. The whole neighborhood feels different now. Safer. Kinder." Michael looked around. Kids were riding their bikes. Neighbors were chatting across fences. The streets looked the same, but something really had shifted. People cared more, looked out for one another. "I didn't do all that," Michael said shyly. Mr. Thompson smiled. "Maybe not, but you lit the spark." That night, Michael sat on the porch with his mom, wrapped in a blanket, sipping hot cocoa. The stars were bright above them. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I didn't speak up that day?" he asked. Lena looked at him. "Maybe someone else would have, or maybe not, but you did, and that's what matters." Michael nodded slowly. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a boy who made a choice and kept making it every day. That was the real lesson. Bravery wasn't just a big moment in front of a crowd. It was in the small choices, helping someone, speaking kindly, standing up when it's hard. He didn't know what the future would bring, but he knew who he wanted to be, and that was enough. The house was quiet that night. Michael sat at the kitchen table, turning a pencil slowly in his hand. He wasn't doing homework, at least not yet. His mind was still on what had happened outside the store. The look on Mrs. Thompson's face when those boys were yelling at her. It stuck with him like a bad dream. Lena, his mother, walked into the kitchen, her shoulders tired from another long shift at the hospital. But when she saw Michael sitting there, staring off, she knew something was wrong. "You okay, baby?" she asked, her voice gentle as she pulled out a chair beside him. Michael looked up. His eyes were calm, but there was something behind them, something quiet and heavy. "Something happened today," he said slowly, and he told her everything. From the moment he saw the Thompsons struggling with the boys, to the second he stood up and said, "Leave them alone," he told her how scared he felt, how the biggest one shoved him, how the store manager came out and made the boys leave, how Mr. Thompson had thanked him, how Mrs. Thompson's hands were shaking. Lena didn't interrupt. She listened, her eyes never leaving her son's face. When he finished, she took a breath. "You did the right thing," she said softly. "I know it wasn't easy, and I'm proud of you for standing up, even when you were scared." Michael nodded. He didn't smile. He wasn't looking for praise. He just wanted her to know. "But," Lena added, a quiet worry slipping into her voice, "those boys, they're older. You think they might try something?" "I don't know," Michael said, shaking his head. "They looked mad. But they didn't follow me. Not today." Lena's jaw tightened. She leaned back, crossing her arms. "Well, from now on, we stay alert," she said. "If anything feels off, if you see them again, you tell me or a teacher or someone, okay?" "Okay," Michael agreed. She stood, kissed the top of his head, and started making them some hot cocoa. That was her way of protecting him when words weren't enough. Warm drinks, long hugs, little things that made everything feel safe again. But that night, even after the cocoa and a warm blanket, sleep didn't come easily for Michael. He tossed and turned, thinking of all the things that could happen. Would the boys come back? Would they find out where he lived? He tried not to be scared, but the fear crawled into his chest and stayed there. Morning came with golden light spilling through his window. It looked like a regular day. Birds were chirping. The neighbor's dog barked like always. But when Michael stepped outside with his backpack, he saw it. A black SUV, parked across the street. It wasn't familiar. Not like the beat-up cars most people drove on their block. This one was clean, shiny, dark windows. It didn't belong. It was too quiet, too still. Michael froze on the porch. He stared at the SUV. It didn't move. Nobody got out. He tried to tell himself it was just someone visiting a neighbor, someone stopping to check directions. But his chest felt tight, like it wasn't just a car, like it was watching. Still, he forced himself to keep walking, step by step. He didn't look back. He didn't run. But the whole way to school, his skin felt like it was buzzing, like someone was behind him, like something wasn't right. At school, he tried to focus, but he couldn't stop checking the windows. During lunch, while his friends joked and traded snacks, he stared at the door. What if they came here? What if they followed him? But nothing happened. The day ended. He packed up his things and headed home. That's when he saw it again. The same SUV, same spot, same dark windows, still parked, still silent. Michael's heart thudded in his chest. He slowed down, staring at it. Was someone inside? He couldn't tell. He didn't want to go near it. His feet moved faster now, straight for home. As soon, As he walked in, he dropped his bag and called out, "Mom!" Lena appeared almost instantly, alarm flashing across her face. "What is it?" "There's a car," Michael said breathlessly. "Same one from this morning. It's still there." Without a word, Lena grabbed her phone and looked out the window. Her voice was calm but serious when she called the police, non-emergency line. She described the vehicle, gave their address, and then hung up. "They'll send someone to check it out," she said. "In the meantime, stay inside. Keep the doors locked." Michael nodded. His mind was racing. Why was the car there? Was it those boys? Were they planning something? He sat on the couch, barely blinking. Every few minutes, he looked out the window. The SUV hadn't moved. It sat there like it was waiting for something. Eventually, a patrol car pulled up. But by the time the officer knocked on their door, the black SUV was gone. No plate number, no face to describe, just gone. The officer was kind, told them to call, again, if it returned. Promised to patrol the area more often, but the unease stayed. That night, Michael sat close to his mom on the couch, their hands clasped tight. Nothing had happened, but something had changed, and whatever it wasn't over. The next morning, the sky was clear and the sun rose like any other day. But Michael felt different. The black SUV was gone, not a trace of it anywhere on the street. But its image had burned into his memory like a shadow that wouldn't leave. His mother had made pancakes for breakfast, his favorite, but he barely tasted them. His mind was somewhere else. Lena kept glancing at him across the table, her brows slightly drawn. "You okay?" she asked, placing a hand gently on his. Michael nodded. "I think so." He wanted to believe it. He wanted to believe the SUV was just a strange coincidence. Maybe someone really had been visiting a neighbor, or maybe they'd gotten lost. But deep down, he knew better. The way it just sat there, the way it didn't move until after the police were called, that wasn't normal. Lena walked him to the door like she always did, her hand resting on his shoulder. "Remember what we talked about," she said. "If you see that car again, or anything that feels off, go somewhere safe and call me, or call the police. Don't try to be brave alone." "I won't," Michael said. "Promise." He looked both ways before stepping onto the sidewalk. Every car he passed made him a little tense. His heart sped up every time he turned a corner. But there was no SUV, no sign of anyone watching. As he reached school, things felt a little more normal. He waved to a few classmates. One of his teachers even smiled and told him she had heard about what he did for the Thompsons. "That was brave," she said. "We need more kids like you." Michael gave a small smile in return, but the praise didn't sink in. His mind was still on that SUV. School dragged by slowly. Every noise in the hallway, every slam of a locker made him jump. When the final bell rang, he packed up quickly and rushed out the door. He just wanted to get home. But when he turned the last corner onto his street, he stopped dead in his tracks. The SUV was back. Same one. Same dark windows. Same spot across from his house. It hadn't moved an inch. His heart sank. His breath caught, in his throat. It was like a scene from a dream that had returned to haunt him. Only this wasn't a dream. This was real. And this time, someone was definitely inside. He could make out the faint shape of a person in the driver's seat. Not moving, just sitting there, watching. Michael's palms were sweaty. He wanted to run, but his legs wouldn't move at first. Then suddenly, he heard his mom's voice in his head. "Don't try to be brave alone." He turned and ran, not toward the house, but back the way he came. He ducked into a nearby bakery where a neighbor worked. The woman behind the counter, a kind older lady who had known Michael since he was little, looked up in surprise. "Michael," she said. "What's wrong? There's a strange car outside my house again," he panted. "I think they're watching me." Without hesitation, she locked the bakery door and called his mother. 10 minutes later, Lena arrived, rushed, breathless, her face pale but determined. She hugged Michael tight and didn't let go for a long time. "I called the police again," she said. "They're on their way." The SUV was still there when the patrol car pulled up. But this time, something different happened. 2 men got out of the SUV. Michael and Lena watched from the bakery window, hands tightly clasped. The men didn't look like the kind of people Michael had feared. They were dressed in suits, not like gang members or angry teenagers. One was tall, with a clean-shaven face and calm eyes. The other wore glasses and carried a small briefcase. The officer walked over and spoke to them. They talked for a few minutes. Then the taller man pointed toward the bakery. The officer nodded. Lena tensed. "Stay right here," she told Michael and stepped outside. Michael watched as his mother spoke with the officer and the 2 men. She looked unsure at first, her arms crossed. But then one of the men pulled something from his pocket, a folded letter. He handed it to her. She read it slowly. Her eyebrows lifted. Her hand moved to her chest. Then she turned around, opened the bakery door, and called to Michael. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice soft. "These men, they aren't here to hurt you. They're here because they heard what you did for the Thompsons." Michael stared at them, confused. "What?" "They're from a community organization. They want to thank you." Still unsure, Michael stepped forward. The taller man gave him a small, warm smile. "You must be Michael," he said. "We've been looking for you." Michael blinked. "Why?" "Because bravery like yours doesn't go unnoticed," the man said. "We'd like to give you something, and talk to you about something bigger." He opened the briefcase and pulled out a sealed envelope, then handed Michael a small wrapped package. Michael looked at it, his hands trembling slightly. "What's inside?" he asked. "Open it with your mother," the man said gently. "It's meant for both of you." And with that, the men thanked the officer, nodded once more to Michael and Lena, and drove off. Quietly, respectfully. No mystery. No threat, just a visit that didn't feel real yet. Michael stood there for a moment, frozen, holding the package and the envelope. Something was changing, and deep inside, he knew. This was just the beginning. Michael couldn't stop staring at the envelope in his hand. Even after the black SUV disappeared down the street, leaving behind only the soft sound of tires on pavement, he still hadn't moved. His fingers gripped the edge of the package, but his mind was spinning too fast to open it. Everything had happened so quickly. Just this morning, he thought that SUV might be watching him. Now, 2 strangers had come out of it, handed him a package, said kind things, and left. It felt too good to be true. His mom finally spoke first, her voice steady but gentle. "Let's go home. We'll open it together." Back at their small kitchen table, the same place where Michael had told her about the grocery store incident days earlier, they sat side by side. Lena turned the envelope over carefully. It had a gold seal on the back, pressed into the paper like something official. Michael couldn't believe this was real. She broke the seal and pulled out a letter printed on thick, cream-colored paper. As she read aloud, her voice cracked with emotion. "Dear Michael, we recently learned about your act of courage and compassion in defending 2 elderly members of your community. Your bravery has deeply inspired us. In recognition of your actions, we are honored to present you with this small token of appreciation, and we invite you and your mother to a community celebration next week, where you will be recognized among other local heroes. Your kindness reminds us that no act of good is ever too small. With gratitude, the Community Alliance team. Michael sat frozen. Local hero? He whispered. Lena smiled, eyes glistening. That's exactly what you are. Still stunned, he turned to the package. He peeled the tape slowly, careful not to rip the wrapping. Inside was a smooth wooden box, polished and warm to the touch. When he lifted the lid, both he and Lena gasped. The box was filled with gift cards to local grocery stores, restaurants, even a pharmacy. Beneath them, neatly stacked, were several envelopes with financial assistance and a handwritten note that simply read, "For any needs that might help ease your journey, you deserve peace. Thank you, Michael." Lena covered her mouth with her hand. She sat back in her chair, overwhelmed. This is more than we could have ever imagined," she said softly. Michael didn't speak right away. He was still trying to understand how something that had started with him just doing what felt right, defending the Thompsons, had led to this moment. But now it all made sense. The SUV, the waiting, the careful timing. They weren't watching to scare him. They were watching to make sure they found the right boy. Later that night, after dinner, the air felt a little lighter in their home. They didn't feel so worried about groceries or bills for once. Lena took a moment to call her sister and share the news. Michael sat on the couch, holding the letter again, reading it to himself over and over. Not for fame, not for attention. Just recognition, for something that came from his heart. He thought about Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, how they'd always smiled at him like he was part of their family, how scared they'd looked that day, and how different that moment could have turned out if he had walked away. But he hadn't. He had spoken up. He had stood there, even when his knees were shaking. And now, somehow, that small moment had turned into something big. That night, as he lay in bed, Michael looked up at the ceiling. He didn't feel like the same boy who sat quietly in class or played games at recess. He didn't feel invincible, but he did feel seen. He felt like someone had reached into his small life and told him, "What you did matters." He turned to the side and glanced out the window. The street was quiet, peaceful. No black SUVs, no strange cars, just the soft glow of streetlights and the occasional bark from a neighbor's dog. He thought about the celebration they had been invited to. What would he say? What would he wear? Would there be a stage? Would Mr. and Mrs. Thompson be there? So many questions. But one thing felt certain now. He wasn't scared anymore. Not of being noticed, not of standing up, not of what might happen if you decide to do what's right. Because tonight, Michael had proof that one voice, even a small one, can be heard. The week moved slowly, but in the best way. For the first time in a long while, Michael felt like life wasn't rushing past him. Each day held a small surprise, a soft reminder that something new was blooming, not just around him, but inside. Him too. Since the visit from the men in the black SUV, word had quietly spread around the neighborhood. Some neighbors smiled a little more when they passed by. One woman from down the street dropped off a tray of muffins and simply said, "Thank you for looking out for our elders." Even Michael's school principal called him into her office, not for trouble this time, but just to say she was proud of him. But it wasn't the praise that stuck with him. It was what came next. The following Friday, Michael and his mom sat at their small kitchen table again, this time getting ready for the event the letter had mentioned. It would be held at the community center, just a few blocks away, and they had been told he would be recognized as one of the local heroes. That word still made Michael blush a little. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a boy who got lucky doing the right thing. Lena laid out a clean white shirt for him, one she had bought on sale months ago, saving it for something special. Michael had never imagined that special would mean this. "Does it look okay?" he asked as he buttoned it up, standing in front of the mirror. His mom smiled softly, adjusting the collar. "You look perfect. Your dad would have said you looked sharp." Michael's eyes flicked up. She didn't talk about his dad much. He had passed when Michael was just a baby. There were no memories, only the stories Lena told once in a while, late at night when the mood felt right. He believed in standing up for people too, she added. "Just like you?" Michael nodded, not sure what to say. A warmth spread through his chest. When they stepped outside and began walking toward the community center, something felt different in the air. The streets he had once hurried down nervously now felt welcoming. Every corner reminded him of something: helping Mr. Thompson with birdseed, playing tag with neighborhood kids, even walking home nervously after standing up to the boys. All those moments had led here. As they approached the building, colorful banners fluttered in the breeze. One read, "Community Heroes, Celebrating Courage and Kindness." Michael stopped for a second, staring at the words. His mom gently nudged him forward. "Go on," she whispered. Inside, the room was buzzing. Tables lined with snacks and drinks, families chatting, children running around in excitement. But what caught Michael's eye was the stage. Simple, wooden, with a microphone standing in the middle, and a small screen behind it showing photos of different people around the community. He wasn't sure what he expected. But this felt big. Suddenly, he heard his name. "Michael! Over here!" It was Mr. Thompson. He and Mrs. Thompson were near the front row, dressed neatly, looking proud and a little emotional. Mrs. Thompson opened her arms and pulled Michael in for a hug the moment he got close. "You're going to do great," she whispered, holding him close. "You already have." The ceremony began not long after. One by one, different community members were recognized, some for helping in shelters, some for tutoring kids, others for organizing cleanup drives. Michael watched them go up, speak, smile, sometimes cry, and then his name was called. He felt a strange stillness as he stood up. The world didn't spin, but his heart sure did. Lena squeezed his hand once, then let go. As he walked to the stage, the applause rang out, not loud or wild, but steady and real. He didn't know how to explain it, but it wasn't just for him. It was for what he stood for the idea that doing something small can ripple into something big. Standing at the mic, he looked out at all those faces. "I didn't think standing up for someone would bring me here," he began, voice quiet, but steady. "I just saw something that wasn't right, and I knew I couldn't walk away." He told them about that day. The fear, the push, the silence after he spoke up. The way the store manager had appeared like an anchor. How Mr. and Mrs. Thompson had looked at him. Not like a kid, but like someone who mattered. "I didn't know anyone noticed," he said. "But I guess kindness has a way of echoing." He paused, then added, "My mom always tells me, do what's right, even if it's hard. And now I know, doing what's right changes everything." When he stepped down, the applause rose again, louder this time. Michael didn't smile wide. He didn't wave. He just looked at his mom, who had her hand over her heart, tears in her eyes, and nodded. After the ceremony, people came up to shake his hand. Some wanted to take pictures. Others just gave him hugs or kind words. But what touched him most was a boy around his age who walked up, eyes wide and hopeful. "I saw what happened outside the store," he said, voice barely a whisper. "I was there, but I didn't do anything. I was scared." Michael put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "It's okay," he said. "Next time, maybe you will." The boy nodded, and in that moment, Michael realized something. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something even bigger. The applause from the community celebration echoed in Michael's ears long after the evening ended. But what stayed with him more than anything were the conversations that followed. Dozens of people came up after the ceremony, not just to shake his hand, but to share. Adults, teenagers, even younger kids. They told him how his story made them think, how it reminded them of moments when they should have spoken up but didn't. One woman said she hadn't visited her elderly neighbor in months, but was going to the very next morning. That night, as he walked home with Lena under the quiet streetlights, the sound of distant laughter in the air, something clicked in Michael's heart. He had always thought of courage as something loud, like in movies, big, dramatic moments. But now he knew the truth. Courage was often small, quiet. A whisper inside that says, "This isn't right. Do something." He didn't sleep much that night, not because he was nervous, but because his mind was full of ideas. The very next day, Michael found himself sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook. He wasn't doing schoolwork. He was sketching out something new, something he'd been thinking about ever since Mr. Johnson and Mr. Roberts talked to him after the ceremony. They had asked him if he'd be interested in helping with their youth outreach program. They said kids listened better to other kids, especially when the message came from someone real, not just a speech on a poster. Michael had agreed right away. But now he wanted to do more than just help. He wanted to lead, so he came up with something called Young Champions, a peer-led group where kids could come together to talk, support one another, and come up with ways to help their community. Not just to talk about problems, but to do something about them. When he presented the idea to Mr. Johnson the following week, the man's eyes lit up. "This is exactly the kind of leadership we hoped you'd bring," he said. "Let's build it." And build it they did. The first meeting had only 5 kids, a few shy boys from Michael's school, one girl from a nearby neighborhood who had heard about the grocery store story. They sat in a circle at the community center, fidgeting with snacks and avoiding eye contact. But Michael broke the silence with a question. Has anyone ever seen something wrong and didn't know what to do? At first, no one spoke. Then, slowly, hands started to rise. One boy said he saw someone being bullied on the bus and stayed quiet because he didn't want to be next. Another girl said she saw a man yelling at a woman on the street and froze because she didn't know if she was supposed to get involved. Michael didn't judge them, he nodded. "I felt that way too," he said. "Even when I spoke up, I was scared the whole time. But doing something, even if it's small, it can change everything." That meeting changed the tone. From then on, the group began to grow. Every week, more kids showed up. Some were shy. Some were loud. Some had stories that made people cry. Others had ideas that sparked laughter and hope. They planned park cleanups, helped elderly neighbors with yard work, and even created a bulletin board at school where students could anonymously write down something kind they had done or seen someone else do. They called it the Wall of Goodness. But Michael didn't just want the good deeds to stay in their group. He wanted the whole community to feel it. So he suggested something bold, a kindness chain. Each person who received help or kindness had to pay it forward to someone else and then come back and share what happened. At first, some adults rolled their eyes. "It's cute," one teacher said, "but these things don't last." But Michael didn't argue. He just kept going. One day at school, a lunchroom worker burst into tears when she discovered her lunch tray had already been cleaned by a student who left a sticky note saying, "Thank you for everything you do." Another time, an elderly man who often sat alone at the park found himself surrounded by kids offering him lemonade and drawing pictures with him on the sidewalk. It didn't happen all at once, and it wasn't perfect, but it was real. At home, Lena watched all of it unfold with quiet awe. Her son, who once came home crying after standing up for a classmate, was now being asked to speak at assemblies. One night, as he practiced a talk in front of the mirror, she said softly, "You've found your voice, baby." Michael looked back at her reflection. "I think I've always had it," he said. didn't know people would listen. She walked over and wrapped her arms around him from behind. Now they are, and you're using it for good. That's all that matters. As the weeks turned into months, young champions expanded to other schools. Michael and Mr. Johnson set up a calendar where kids could attend workshops, speak at town halls, or volunteer for small projects. The goal was never to be famous. It was to be useful, to stand up, speak up, and lift others. And every time Michael felt overwhelmed, he went back to the Thompsons' house. He'd sit on their porch, talk with them about birds or books or silly news stories. Mr. Thompson would sip tea slowly and say, "Still lighting sparks, huh?" And Michael would just smile, because yes, he was, and the fire was only growing. It had been almost a year since Michael stood up for the Thompsons outside that grocery store. One moment, one decision, had created a ripple across not just his own life, but through the heart of an entire community. And now, standing in front of a packed school auditorium, Michael looked out at the faces of hundreds of students, teachers, and parents. Some smiling, some curious, some waiting to be inspired. He took a deep breath and stepped up to the podium. He was taller now. His voice had deepened a little, but his message hadn't changed. "You don't have to be big to make a difference," he began, his voice calm and steady. "You just have to care, and you have to act, even when you're scared." Behind him, a large banner read, "Young Champions Leadership Day." It was the first of what the school district hoped would become an annual tradition. And it had all started with a 12-year-old boy who simply didn't look away when someone needed help. After the applause died down and the event ended, Michael was surrounded by a sea of young kids asking questions, shaking his hand, or just standing there, shyly hoping he'd notice them. And he did. He saw them all, because he'd been one of them. Later that evening, back at home, Michael sat on the front steps with his mom. The sun was setting, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink. Lena sat beside him, resting her head on his shoulder like she used to when he was younger. "You're making your mark," she said quietly. "You're showing people what's possible." Michael didn't answer right away. He was thinking. "You know what I've learned the most, Mom?" he asked. "What's that?" "That real change doesn't happen all at once. It's slow. It's messy. Sometimes it starts with just one person, one moment. And a lot of times you don't even realize how far it's gone until you stop and look around." She nodded, squeezing his hand. "That's the kind of change that lasts." They sat in, silence for a while, watching as porch lights flicked on down the street. The same street where a black SUV once sat. The same street where Michael used to walk home with nervous steps and eyes over his shoulder. Now, that street felt like home. Like family. Like community. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson still lived down the block. Michael still visited them often, usually on Sundays. They still fed the birds together in the park, still laughed over silly stories and shared cookies that Mrs. Thompson always insisted on baking fresh, no matter how many times Michael said, she didn't have to. Sometimes the three of them would sit quietly on their porch together, and Mr. Thompson would say, "Still proud of you, son." And Michael, still shy when accepting praise, would just nod. But deep down, he was proud too. Not because of awards or speeches or newspaper articles, but because he had helped people feel seen. He had shown kids that their voices mattered. That being kind wasn't weak. It was powerful. That doing what was right wasn't something you waited for someone else to do. It was something you chose, again and again. And now, there were kids all over the district choosing to speak up. Teachers starting after-school kindness clubs, neighbors, helping one another more. Local stores putting up signs that read, "Be a champion today." Michael had lit a match, but it was the community that kept the flame alive. One evening, while cleaning out an old box in the closet, Michael found the wooden box from that day, still holding a few leftover gift cards and the original letter from the community group. He ran his fingers across the words. "Your kindness reminds us that no act of good is ever too small." He smiled to himself and quietly whispered, "You were right." Now, as life moved forward, Michael had bigger dreams. He wanted to write, speak, help build programs in other towns. He didn't know exactly where the path would lead, but he wasn't afraid of that anymore. He had already walked through fear once and came out stronger on the other side. And for your audience, the takeaway is this. Sometimes, all it takes is one small voice, one brave moment, one person who refuses to look away. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to start. So, if you've ever hesitated to stand up for someone, if you've ever stayed silent because you were afraid, remember Michael. Remember what one choice can do. And maybe next time, you'll be the one who makes a difference.